The Commanders and Eagles are going to face off in the NFC Championship Game, and the Commanders' best shot hinges on making sure that Saquon Barkley can't run them over on his way to the Super Bowl. That and more on this episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's family of sites, and I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. You can also find me helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this season. And I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode. To all the everydayers out there, a special thank you to you for coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we're going to talk about the PFWA snubbing the Washington Commanders this season. We're going to break down the tale of the tape and key matchups between the Eagles and the Commanders for this weekend's NFC Championship Game. And of course, we're starting it all off with the biggest one, Saquon Barkley, Philadelphia Eagles running back, against the Washington Commanders defense. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL, to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5. The Commanders and Eagles are facing off in the NFC Championship Game. It'll be the third time they play each other. The rubber match, each of them has a win. And of course, the Washington Commanders' best chances are going to rest with how they can handle Saquon Barkley and this Philadelphia Eagles rushing attack. The NFC Championship Game, tale of the tape. We've got two teams, Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Commanders. In the regular season, Washington Commanders went 12-5, Philadelphia Eagles 14-3. The Philadelphia Eagles winning the NFC East Division title for, I think it's like the fourth time in the last 7 years or something crazy like that. Eagles have been one of the top teams in the NFC East, certainly for quite some time now. Point differentials this season, Washington outscored their opponents in total this year by 94 points, while the Philadelphia Eagles held an advantage in that category, outscoring their opponents this season by 160. Of course, head-to-head, they are 1-1 against each other this season. Philadelphia got the 26-18 win over the Washington Commanders in Week 11 on Thursday Night Football in Philadelphia. The Eagles in that game had 434 total yards of offense, 228 of those yards coming on the ground. Washington lost the turnover battle -1. Philadelphia won the time of possession 33 minutes and 4 seconds to 26 minutes and 56 seconds. But Washington held a 10-6 lead entering the fourth quarter of that game. But Philadelphia outscored the Washington Commanders 20-8, leading ultimately, or 20-8 in the fourth quarter, ultimately leading to the victory. And that 20 points that the Eagles scored in that fourth quarter, the second most points allowed in a fourth quarter this season. The team that scored the most points against Commanders in the fourth quarter, the Dallas Cowboys, the very next week. Obviously, this Eagles game, Cowboys game, part of that 3-game slide that the Washington Commanders had there in the front half of the back half of the season. Washington won the second matchup between these two teams 36-33 in Week 16 in Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. Of course, that was a game-winning touchdown pass and catch. Jaden Daniels finding Jamison Crowder in the end zone to win that game. Washington had 368 yards of total offense in that game to lead the way, but Philly still was able to amass 211 yards rushing in the game. Of course, Washington lost the turnover differential, -3 in the turnover differential. And you might remember, first team to ever turn the ball over 5 times, give up 30 points, and still win the game. Philadelphia won the time of possession, 36 minutes, 18 seconds to 23 minutes, 42 seconds. And then Washington entered the fourth quarter of that game trailing by 13, outscored Philly 22-6 in the fourth quarter. It's the only 20-plus fourth quarter given up this season by the Eagles. In fact, the only quarter where the Eagles defense gave up 20 or more points at all in the entirety of the season, including the postseason. So certainly some anomalies in this season matchup this year between these two teams. But the bottom line is both teams have a win, and both teams won after trailing in the fourth quarter. So I'm not going to tell you that you should hope your team is trailing in the fourth quarter of any game. But in this series this year, which has been really weird and kind of topsy-turvy, the Washington Commanders, Philadelphia Eagles have each won the game that they ended up trailing in when we entered the fourth quarter. Washington is -4 against the Philadelphia Eagles in turnover differential all season. So obviously they're going to want to undo a little bit of that. The last time these teams met in the playoffs was the only time they met in the playoffs, 1990 NFL playoffs. Washington won that game 20-6 in the wild card round of that year's playoffs. The Commanders would then go on, Washington would then go on to lose to the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round. As far as history is concerned, with number 6 seeds making it to the Super Bowl, the Pittsburgh Steelers were the first to ever do it in Super Bowl 40. The Green Bay Packers did it most recently. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in that Super Bowl 45, 5 years later, after the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to do it. The good news is, as far as I can tell, those are the only 2 6 seeds that I can track down that made it to the Super Bowl. They also both won their respective Super Bowls. So I'm not telling you that if the Commanders make it, you're guaranteed they're going to win, but history certainly is sitting on their side. So we get to these key matchups here, right? And I asked insiders for their key matchup. I also wanted to open up the mailbag and see if we can find a question or two to hit here. Really, we're going to talk about the matchups, but we are going to hit one mailbag question because it also goes with the most popular key matchup coming into this game. The mailbag question said, Barkley killed us both games in the regular season. What do you think our approach will or should be to mitigate damage from him specifically? And is he the biggest concern on the Eagles offense? And then listen, I think Saquon Barkley absolutely is the biggest concern on the offense, but it's not because of what he simply does on the field. It's because of what he can do early on the field and the pressure that can put on your opposing offense. So obviously the Philadelphia Eagles defense is very good. They got a little bit banged up in the divisional round matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. We'll have to see as we get through the week of practice and practice reports how that really impacts them, but especially the loss of Quinyon Mitchell potentially in that game and potentially in this upcoming game could loom very, very large if he's not able to go with what I believe is a shoulder injury. Again, we'll track that more as we get into the rest of the week. But the impact of Saquon Barkley, if you want to look at it on a surface level, the Eagles have only lost one game when Saquon had over 100 yards rushing, and that, of course, was in Washington in Week 16, which is another game that is full of anomalies, right? The turnovers, the points given up, all that stuff. Now, it's the same record when he has 117 or more yards of total offense, so not just running, but just as an overall weapon. Now, Barkley is one of 4 running backs this season to rush for over 100 yards against the Washington Commanders, and as much as we hear about how bad this Washington Commanders run defense is, you would think that there'd be more than 4 backs, more than 5 games out of 17 that this team has actually given up 100 yards rushing to. Saquon Barkley has 2 of those games. DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears has 1. Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens has 1. And James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals has 1. Now, the Washington Commanders, the key significant stat there is the Washington Commanders are 3-2 in those 5 games. They're 9-3 in all other games. So the win probability, win percentage for the Washington Commanders goes up drastically when they're not giving up over 100 yards to a single rusher in a single game. But how much does Saquon Barkley really ride on this thing? Well, the question there is not so much how much can this defense stop Saquon Barkley? It's how much can they stop Saquon Barkley early, combined with how much can the Washington Commanders offense score early. So the Washington Commanders gave up a boatload of yards to Saquon Barkley in the second game between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you remember, the majority of those yards came in the first half, came really in the first 4 possessions of the game, if I remember correctly. And after that, the Commanders' run defense was able to kind of lock down. Well, that's kind of been the trend for most of the seasons. We see the Washington Commanders' rush defense give up spurts of yards here and there, but for the majority of the game, they actually tend to be fairly solid and fairly effective. Against the Detroit Lions, it was a little bit different. We saw Jahmyr Gibbs get explosive plays really at different points during the game. There wasn't just one run of yards, but that Detroit Lions offense is commonly thought of as a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more more effective in using misdirections. Of course, offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who, if you haven't heard, is going to be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears, so will no longer be in Detroit, kind of really doing a lot of things to take the discipline away from a defense, as Joe Witt Jr. was talking about. Kellen Moore's offense in Philadelphia is a little bit more straightforward, not as much misdirection, not as much sleight of hand. So I think that's one reason that the Washington Commanders defense has been able to kind of lock down a little bit more in times against a guy like Saquon Barkley. So while Saquon Barkley certainly is going to have an impact on this game, I don't want to downplay his contributions. I think it's more so about what the Washington Commanders offense is doing while Saquon Barkley, or during those moments when Saquon Barkley is doing well. Because you go back to that first loss, Saquon Barkley is ripping off big touchdown runs, and unfortunately the Commanders offense is not able to answer, and that eventually puts too much pressure on the team. They end up losing that game. In this first game, Barkley did most of his damage early. The Washington Commanders offense was able to do enough that when it came down to crunch time, they didn't have to get one-dimensional against the defense. That if you get one-dimensional against them, they're going to come at you very, very difficult, or very, very, very aggressively, I should say, from the front line standpoint. Not necessarily blitz heavy, but they're just going to pin their ears back and pass rush and know how to do that. So those are really the impacts. It's not necessarily Saquon by himself. It's Saquon in relation to what the Commanders offense is doing. If they continue to start fast in the postseason like they have the first 2 games, then even if Saquon Barkley eats a little bit to begin this game, it's not going to be too detrimental. It'll be key for the Commanders defense to be able to eventually slow him down, lock him down like they have in the first 2 games during a stretch, lock him down. The first game, it was early. Second game, it was late. Whenever that time needs to come, they'll have to answer that bell. In other key matchups, Marshon Lattimore is going to match up against A.J. Brown. Washington's right guard, whoever that is going to need to help hold off Philadelphia's defensive front. And Quan Martin is going to have his hands full trying to help against Saquon Barkley, but also quarterback Jalen Hurts. That's all coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by LinkedIn. And with LinkedIn, they know that growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you right now, it's a game changer when it comes to finding the right people. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial, and LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills to interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the right job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates. So hire smarter this year. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is also brought to you in part by Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you're going to want to make the most out of the final weeks of football action. That is where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching these games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winning, it is clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use the code Locked On NFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Run your game. In other key matchups, Marshon Lattimore is going to match up against A.J. Brown, the Washington Commanders' right guard. Whoever that might be is going to need to hold off Philly's front. And Quan Martin is going to have his hands full containing Jalen Hurts. If you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider today. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can text me your comments, your questions, your thoughts and opinions of what's going on with the Washington Commanders, and you're going to get a good amount back from me, including live text during games, practices, press conferences. And you're also going to get exclusive access and invitations to our insider-only Zoom conferences where we get together as a group and have a conversation about the Washington Commanders. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. So some other key matchups that insiders brought up. So again, this is another way that the insider program affects the show is I sent out a text to the insiders, say, hey, look, we're going to do a Monday episode. I know the post-game episode was technically my Monday episode, but I was like, you know what, Monday night, we're going to do a show, and we're going to do it about this Philadelphia Eagles heavy hitter matchup, heavyweight matchup, right? That's why we did a tail of the tape in the beginning, kind of a boxing analogy, things like that. One of the ones they brought up, Marshon Lattimore against A.J. Brown. Now, Marshon Lattimore was on the field the last time the Washington Commanders played the Philadelphia Eagles. He was targeted 10 times in week 16. The Philadelphia Eagles went right at Marshon Lattimore. They said, you know what, buddy? That hamstring might be healed. Maybe it's for real. Maybe it's not. We're going to test it out. And they went after him. The Washington Commanders defense kept him on the field quite a bit. He ended up aggravating that hamstring. Didn't play again until the playoff, the wild card round in the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers certainly tried to go after him with a little bit of success. And then last week against the Detroit Lions, they went after him a little bit as well. We'll talk about that. A little bit less success, I would say. But I think every week that Marshon gets to play, every week that Marshon gets to practice is only going to help him get better and better. So if we look at the last time he faced this team, Lattimore was targeted 10 times in week 16, allowed 5 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. That's a 105.4 passer rating, and he was flagged 3 times. And I know we did not agree with all those flags. That's fine, but he was flagged 3 times. So not a banner performance. You know what I mean? Coverage grade against Detroit was better, but he was only targeted once. Did make 1 stop against the Eagles and 1 stop against the Lions of run defense. A stop, according to Pro Football Focus, is a 3rd down run or 4th down run for a first down that doesn't get the first down yardage. That's considered a stop. So Marshon Lattimore showing some impact in the run defense as well, which is something that we talked about when he was traded to the Washington Commanders there in early November. So if you expect him to kind of get better and better as he goes and continues to break the rust off and get up to speed with his defense, its checks, its languages, all those things, then this week against Philadelphia Eagles, because again, I have to believe that Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore are going to absolutely test Marshon Lattimore. You also see the Washington Commanders being a little bit more conservative, a little bit more deliberate in how much they manage his workload. If they use a lot of motion where it drags him this way, that way, run him across the field, stuff like that, expect to see a little bit more of a rotation out of him than the last time they did against Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, when he's not on the field, that may very well make the Eagles go after whoever his replacement is a little bit more. So that matchup certainly is going to loom large. Obviously, A.J. Brown is a big part of what the Philadelphia Eagles want to do, not always necessarily get to do. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit as well. The next matchup that was brought up, this is the one that if you ask me which one is the biggest matchup of this game, this is going to be it. The right guard, whoever it is, might be Trent Scott, might be Michael Dieter, might be Chris Paul. I don't think it's going to be Chris Paul, but whoever it is against that Eagles front, specifically the left side defensive tackle, which is Jalen Carter. And that is a beast of a matchup to draw in the playoffs. I mean, that's a beast of a draw no matter what, but especially in the NFC Championship game, Jalen Carter is going to be coming out there trying to wreak havoc. In the first matchup between the Eagles and Commanders, Jalen had 6 tackles, 1 quarterback hurry, 4 stops. So again, stops are tackles made on 3rd or 4th down where the defense or the offense is trying to run to gain the yards to gain. He had 4 of those stops in week 11. That's a lot. It's a major impact against the Washington Commanders in week 11. Week 16, 3 tackles, so fewer tackles, but 4 quarterback hurries, a forced fumble, 2 stops, but he also missed 4 tackles in week 16. Something that I noticed from week 11 to week 16 is that the Eagles made a lot more effort to get Carter away from Sam Cosmi, which is who he was going up against in that first matchup, led to an increase in hurries by Jalen Carter, an increased ability for Jalen to get into the backfield and put some pressure on Jaden Daniels. So I expect them to do that, but also I expect them to be more willing to go head to head. You know what I mean? Sam Cosmi is not going to be out there. So Jalen Carter is going to feel like whoever's out there, whether it's Trent, whether it's Michael Dieter, whoever it is, he's going to feel like he has the ability to go up against that guy. So I still think they're going to play a little bit of their games just because it was effective against the rest of the offensive line, but also expect him to go one-on-one against that right guard as much as possible. So some things that the Washington Commanders can do. We got this question in the mailbag as well. What can the Commanders do to try to mitigate that loss of Sam Cosmi? Well, you can roll right. So if you roll right, you're going to be rolling to the defense's left, which pretty much rolls into the side that Jalen Carter is in. However, you have some combo blocks to shut the door on him, not let him get an outside angle, pursuit angle upfield with right tackle, Andrew Wiley. You can also use a running back to keep in a protection in case he gets past that right guard. Also use a tight end to chip block an edge so that Andrew Wiley can punch down on Jalen Carter a little bit, come back, set the edge himself. There's a few things that they can do. I do not expect whoever the right guard is going to be alone in this one, but at the same time, you can't just have Tyler Biotish combo with him every single rep and Nick Allegretti is going one-on-one because the Eagles defense is going to sniff that out and they're going to do some things to try to exploit something like that as well. So expect a little bit of it. Eventually there's going to be a time here or there where that right guard, whoever it is going to have to go one-on-one. And look, man, you get paid just like everybody else does. You may not get paid as much as everybody else does, but you do get paid. So you got to go out there and do it, whoever you are. Also some motion left runs, some rollouts, things like that to get Jalen Carter running, get him a little bit tired. But I do think that's going to be a massive matchup. Clearly, right? You lose arguably your best offensive lineman, certainly your most established offensive lineman up against a defense that is as good as this Eagles one is up front. That's going to be a huge aspect of this game. Quan Martin against Jalen Hurts is also a matchup that was brought up by several people. Only 11% of Jalen Hurts' 358 pass attempts this season have gone 20 or more yards downfield. That's 21 of his 41 attempts, 41 deep pass attempts this season. 21 of those went down the right side of the field. But where he's connecting most in respect to, to how many attempts it is over the middle. He's 4 for 5 over the middle for 121 yards and has thrown 2 touchdowns there. 116 of his passes, Jalen Hurts' passes, have gone to the left side. 143 have gone over the middle. 99 have gone to the right. So Jalen Hurts, clearly a quarterback that prefers to throw middle to left, but will throw right. And from the numbers, Usually if he's looking deep, it's to the right side. Possibly from my scheme design, Kellen Moore trying to catch defenses sleeping on the right side a little bit to take advantage of some one-on-one matchups. Understanding these tendencies are going to help Quan Martin keep a lid on that offense when they try to go deep. Again, Washington Commanders pass defense, one of the top 10 defenses in preventing explosives during the regular season. So you expect them to kind of keep up that trend. The Eagles only went deep twice against the Rams, once to the right, once to the left, targeted 15 or more yards, once between 15 and 20 yards, I should say, downfield, twice, each to one side. All the other 16 passes by Jalen Hurts against the Rams were underneath 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. So a pretty even split. Of course, the weather was not great. Weather's not supposed to be as bad as it was in the divisional round in Philly, but it's not going to be great either from a cold standpoint. Goff went deep 6 times against the Commanders, completed 3, was intercepted twice. All 3 of his interceptions on Saturday in the divisional round were 15 or more yards downfield. Hurts tried to go 20-plus yards deep in Week 11 just once. And even with Kenny Pickett in the game in Week 16, the team only went deep twice. So not a lot of deep throws probably coming from the Philadelphia Eagles offense just by their tendency, which allows Quan Martin to be a little bit more aggressive towards the line of scrimmage and also helping on pursuit to stop Saquon Barkley and potentially corral Jalen Hurts if and when he scrambles. So we'll see if Quan Martin can have a big impact on this game. I think he certainly had a big impact throughout the season, not enough to get a PFWA All-NFL or All-NFC nod, but the snubs that really have people confused are with players like Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Bobby Wagner. We'll talk about that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today in part thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going all postseason long. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and they've got a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. This weekend, the Washington Commanders are once again the biggest underdogs of the weekend, just like they were last week. This time, it's a 5.5-point spread. They're 5.5-point underdogs currently on FanDuel to lose to the Philadelphia Eagles in the link. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills are projected to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs by 1.5 points at Arrowhead this Sunday in the AFC Championship game. So those are 2 underdogs that everybody apparently seems to want to see in the Super Bowl. So go to FanDuel.com, join today, and get your $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, talking about the PFWA All-NFL and All-NFC teams, which have snubbed the Washington Commanders. No Jaden Daniels, no Terry McLaurin, no Bobby Wagner, all of them missing from the ranks, no Austin Eckler as a kick returner. So the PFWA, the Pro Football Writers of America, is a group, it's a group of organized writers that are all writing about the pro football in America. I mean, Pro Football Writers of America, right? Pretty much explains itself. Just like the AP, just like the NFL, they have their own awards. I should say, have our own awards. As I'm a member, we vote for all NFL players. We vote for all NFC. It's not unlike all pro teams, things like that. And the results come out and no Commanders. So the PFWA All NFL team, if you want to see the full list, I wrote a few articles about these lists for CommanderGameDay.com. So you can go there. There's one about Dan Quinn potentially being a favorite to be the coach of the year, things like that. And inside of those, I have copied and pasted these lists of rosters of the players that have made it. But, no all NFL for Jaden Daniels. Lamar Jackson gets the number 1 spot there for the all NFL team. There's only one team. There's not a second team all NFL team. Wide receivers, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson of the Bengals and Vikings, respectively, get the wide receiver nods. Who else are there? Linebackers, right? The 2 second-team All-Pro linebackers, Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. Neither of them get all NFL nods. Instead, those go to Nick Bonito of the Denver Broncos and T.J. Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As outside linebackers, like Frankie Louvu would be, and Fred Warner of the San Francisco 49ers gets the All-NFL nod for middle linebacker. Looking at the all NFC team, also no Commanders there. Jared Goff gets the nod as the quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Look, this is a regular season award. The voting is done before the divisional round ever happened. But I think that's probably where people are going to feel the most gypped out of Jaden Daniels not getting that nod. Jaden Daniels, the starting quarterback for the NFC team in the Pro Bowl, which of course everybody hopes he's not going to be able to play in because he'll be getting ready for a Super Bowl. Looking at wide receivers, Justin Jefferson obviously is on there. Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions also getting the nod for the NFC squad over Terry McLaurin. Guards, Landon Dickerson and Chris Lindstrom getting the nods there. Guard instead of Sam Cosmi. Outside linebackers, instead of Frankie Louvu, you got Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel of the Minnesota Vikings. Both Vikings outside linebackers getting those votes. Middle linebacker was a tie between Zach Bond and Fred Warner. No Bobby Wagner. So that is what it is. Kick returner was Kevontae Turpin. So Washington Commanders getting no love from the PFWA. I'm not going to tell you exactly who I voted for, but I will tell you that I voted for multiple Commanders to get some all NFC love, at least, and some all NFL love as well. So in our next episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what we learned, or what we saw rather, when the Washington Commanders beat the Detroit Lions, things to keep going forward in the NFC Conference Championship game, things to leave behind in Detroit City. That will all be next on Locked On Commanders. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. To do that, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler Rowland comes through in the morning. Tony Wiggins comes through the afternoon. And you get the all-new Locked On NFL. It's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.